What's up, Fight Geeks? Welcome to a brand new episode of Two and a Half Fighters. Today's guest is none other but one of the greatest kickboxers who's ever lived, the Iceman, Jean-Yves Thériault. We talk about kickboxing, his career, the evolution of kickboxing, where it is now, and we talk about how he almost jumped into the boxing world and MMA. So hopefully you guys enjoy my conversation with the Iceman, Jean-Yves Thériault.
Hello.
The Iceman, Jean-Yves, what's going on?
How you doing, man?
How are you doing?
I'm good. I asked you first.
Beat me to the punch. I'm good. I'm not here with both my co-hosts, but it's this is a very special interview that I have now. Talking to you.
Okay.
I actually met you when I was 19 years old, debuting one of my first fights. Saw you in the crowd, and
I remember that.
Yeah, just from then, man, that was the first time I was actually starstruck by any fighter, and for you to come to me after the fight, man, it really showed how much of a humbling champion that you were.
Well, do you remember what I told you? I remember I told you that I wanted to have you on my show because you would add a good quality of fighters that I'm always looking for.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what happened from there because I think that you may have decided at that point that you may not be doing this, the competitive side of it. I don't quite remember. Once in a while would ask, Mo, okay, where's Emilio? Is he available? Blah, 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 blah. And it just,
A couple of injuries happened, and then the more I would train, the more I would get hurt, and it was just kind of, okay, where are we going to go from here? And then after when I got healthy again, it was kind of like, okay, we're trying to come back, and then it just kind of now a year, 2 years later, it just went away. Now a lot just coming up with the show, and then talking to all kinds of fighters, and now, I and people listening on, like when you came and you were telling me this thing, and I was hearing it from a champion, it was the most surreal thing I've ever heard. And then after watching your fights, like right after, I remember that you spoke to me after my first fight, and the next day I watched about 20 of your fights in a row, and I was like, this guy came and complimented me, and it was insane, and like I became more of a fan of you, and just watching all your fights.
I do have a pretty good eye for talent, so I wasn't blowing hot air.
Well, enough about me now. Let's get more to you, and a lot of things that people want to know, and people's been asking me, especially when I got you. Oh my God, how did you get him? It's like, well, I know him, and he's obviously represented Canada well, and to say the least, you've had 76 fights.
Yes, sir.
When you look back on that, isn't that kind of surreal that you've had 76 fights?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's I think it's an average of 3 or 4 a year because I did fight 20 years. When you look at it, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, some of the professional boxers had, 150, 200 fights, and even in amateurs, there's a current, I think, lightweight Russian fellow that he's got 345 or so fights. So, professional fights over the course of 20 years, it wasn't that much, but obviously when you say the word 76 fights, when some of these guys are now, world champion at 10 or 12 fights, it does have some sort of an impact, I'm sure.
Is it even crazier if I give you a little fun fact about yourself, that for 11 years you went on undefeated? Did you know that? You probably did, but just to let you know.
Well, I'll tell you honestly, Emilio, I did not at the time pay much attention to these things. I mean, they're information that maybe journalists will keep. I remember one of the journalists here in Ottawa. Reminded me that I hadn't fought or I hadn't lost in whatever amount of years, and that's nice. And my focus was really laser sharp. I didn't pay much attention to these things, and I really my biggest thrill, the biggest ray of sunshine in my day was to work out.
No, for sure, and it shows too. You when everybody talks about kind of the old school kickboxing, there's obviously there's so many names that gives out, but for me, I really think there's like the three like matriarchs of kickboxing. I think it's you, I think it's Rick Rufus, and I think it's Ernesto Hoost. I think you three kind of really plateaued kickboxing, because for a while when kickboxing was getting in, people didn't get involved into it. But then when you three fought, like, especially your style was so fundamentally sound with your rhythm and your side kicks that people were like, oh, this is like for a while people didn't know how to beat you. People didn't even know how to touch you. Like, how did you develop your style? Because kickboxing obviously goes with karate, taekwondo, but how did you develop the Iceman type of style?
Well, I'll tell you, my trainer was pretty anal about throwing this stuff properly, doing the techniques properly, whether it was boxing or kickboxing or kicks or rope skipping. I mean, there's a technique to it, and do it right, or otherwise, get off the pot sort of thing. So I just very easily adopted that mentality. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to dissect it and study it, and every which way I can see how I can improve on it. Whether it's the technical part of it, whether it's the speed part of it, whether it's the strategic part of it. I studied a lot of the movements that I did. I studied the psychology of a fighter. I just really got into this seriously, and evidently it proved the right thing for me to do, anyways. And in all humility here, I'm an average athlete, but I did extraordinary things with the talent that I had. And I think one of the more important things to remember with this is that I did study this stuff. I did study it up and down in all sorts of ways of how to improve it, and the ordinary athlete did extraordinary things.
Yeah, well, that's coming a lot, especially you, especially that I know you, but you're a very humble guy, especially with the amount of fights you had. The fact that you fought 76 times, winning 69 of those times and knocking out 61 people, like I said, your style was, it looked very ordinary, but then, like you said, you put it out there, and the way that you threw your techniques, they were just flawless, they were effective. And people just couldn't solve the puzzle, and I think that's what a lot of people nowadays are trying to get back. Yeah.
This is a statement that we often heard when we were setting up fights, is from the opposing camp. Certainly the management and the trainers and stuff, but they would say, well, Thériault was easy enough to read. I mean, he's simple enough. Punches and kicks are easy. There's nothing flashy about him. And it's indeed, they were right. One of the things that you don't really are able to read is if I may, the intelligence of a fighter, all relatively speaking. The strategies, the angles, the setting up, the patience. My trainer used to say, you have 12 rounds, don't rush. And obviously he was right. I would get some of the fighters, I would get them in the later rounds. But you know what, it was a labor of love for me. I mean, I really, really, really loved the sport that I did. I absolutely got a big thrill out of being a professional athlete, and evidently it translated into some success for me.
well, a lot of success indeed. And now, we're kind of in the age of MMA. We're in the age of mixed martial arts, UFC, Bellator, and obviously for me, like you and I both come from striking backgrounds. I watch Glory. I watch a lot of Bellator kickboxing. But is it weird for you now that obviously there's a lot of debate on it, but most people could agree that everyone's concentrating a lot on the whole MMA, and people are kind of forgetting on the one style of like kickboxing shows. Do you agree with that? Where do you?
Well, of course, I agree. I mean, what MMA did for kickboxing or for the combat sport is to make kickboxing or taekwondo or karate specialty sports. Mine is a striking sport, and there's all sorts of dynamics around that: the angles, the speed, the left, the right, the body, the head, the this, the that, the other. Whereas in MMA, generally speaking, if people are going to fire one or two punches at a time. Although nowadays, I mean, these guys, the strikers are good. The ones that are champions presently, they're all good strikers, and they probably studied boxing or striking the way that has to be applied vis-a-vis the sport of MMA itself. But years ago, they would just sort of swing, and obviously, if somebody gets hurt with those, or somebody gets hit with these small gloves, they're going to be hurt. And nowadays, you get a little bit more precision, but it does remain a sport that is obviously it's mixed. There's all sorts of different components that I didn't have to deal with. Gapping the distance and avoiding a shoot in the legs or a throw or knee or elbow or stuff like that. I didn't need to worry about that. And these guys, because there's so many different facets to this sport, there's a lot to cover. And if you're not strong everywhere, or if you haven't studied all the facets of that art, obviously if the opponent finds a chink in your armor, you're done.
Well, like looking at you, obviously you're one of the most decorated kickboxer on the planet, and forever your name is up there. At the time, like obviously you were dominating the game for your whole career until your last fight back in 1995. Was there a moment or any opportunity that somebody offered you, like an MMA fight? Was there anything that anyone offered you to get out of kickboxing, or?
Well, no. What did happen though was I was offered boxing matches, and one notably, and people in Montreal will certainly remember the Hilton boys. Matthew was then champion, but Matthew was also about 10 pounds lighter than I was, and I was like 3% body fat, so I wasn't able to lose any sort of weight, and they weren't ready to go up, so that's obviously didn't go too far. Some of the other fights that I was offered, the boxing commission may have been, if I dare say, against me in the sense that, well, you'll have to start with 4-round fights or 8-round fights, and it was just a bit of a joke at one point, and so no, MMA was never offered to me, only because it really didn't have any sort of attraction, I guess. I know that it was active before I retired. It was, but it didn't have the same appeal or didn't have the same attention that subsequent years. And with the advent of George St. Pierre and some of the Canadian fighters and some of the very good strikers and the very good fighters, and evidently the way that they marketed this sport, it just took over. And no, my time was done, and I'm happy that I did it the way that I did. People say, had you been in this era, would you have done MMA? I say, listen, I don't really know that I would have or would not have. I was a competitor. I needed to compete. I'm assuming that I probably would have gotten in there. However, successful I could have been, I have no idea. It's a different game altogether. So I probably would have fought just because I'm a competitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, and obviously knowing you and your status, like if right now, yeah, still fighting, you were in MMA, doing that crossover would have been huge, and especially at the time, the Fighting Hiltons, if that fight would have happened, the king of Montreal, that would have been an award on its own, and it's crazy how the fact that you had the Fighting Hiltons, and now you have like their reputation and how they went about things, and then your sterling reputation, your world champion, and how you're respected in your community. How like it means a lot for us, especially as Canadians, that we don't see a lot of great fighters, a lot of champions, but to see somebody like you really raise the bar for us, especially guys like George St. Pierre, Roy McDonald. Do you ever think about that? That, oh wow, it's because of the things that I've done that kind of opened the gates for a lot of these Canadian fighters?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, maybe not to that point, but fact is, I'm a martial artist. Mm-hmm. I did jiu-jitsu for a number of years, and within that structure, there are requirements. The respect, the integrity, the this, the that, and the other. And we here at our school still talk about those things, and not only do we talk about it, but we certainly conduct ourselves in a way that either the children or some of the people around us will certainly recognize. George St. Pierre's a martial artist, a Kyokushin karate fighter. Some of the other guys that you mentioned as well. You will certainly find a very respectful attitude and demeanor from guys who have had a martial art background. I don't mean to say that boxing or anything else does not have that, but I can certainly speak for the martial artist, the true martial artist, the bowing and the respect and the this and the that. And obviously, promoters will sometimes get the fighters to come out of their personality and start, saying things that they normally would not say and acting differently than they normally do. That's the norm. That's the promoter's job, is to sell tickets. And if there's a shock element to the press conference, people are going to buy tickets.
Do you think that was the main difference of how boxing kind of exploded and how UFC exploded and kept kickboxing kind of where it was? Like you said, boxing promoters, MMA promoters, they kind of had to build their guys of talking trash, from time to time being disrespectful. But kickboxers, like you said, where we come from the bowing background, or a very respectful background. Do you think that was one of the reasons why kickboxing never hit that next stratosphere?
Well, it's possible. People, it's the wrestler syndrome. I mean, the good guy against the bad guy. It works in any sport, whether it's hockey, whether it's baseball, whether it's MMA, whether it's sprinting. There's always one against the other, and there's always people deciding that this guy's a good guy and this guy's a bad guy, and that's what sells tickets. And obviously, some of the members of the kickboxing community lend themselves easily to that, but that's just one part of it. You need to have a consistent marketing strategy to put these guys, put these guys on TV, put these guys in the public eye, so that people, whether they're part of the martial art industry or fighting community or not, they will see. We'll take as an example, Conor McGregor. I mean, outside of the martial art community or the MMA community, he still gets attention by doing stupidities. Yep. But somebody said one time, there's no such thing as bad publicity. He may go according to that. He may have bought into that and keep his name alive. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but when you surpass the boundaries of your own sport, you're doing something. You're doing something for people's attention. That's amazing. That's great marketing.
Yeah, and I think the marketing is the best thing, especially for the sport. And I need to ask you. I heard about it in social media. It kind of like crossed my mind because I didn't really believe it or want to believe it because I got excited or didn't think it was going to happen. Were you scheduled to fight this past year? Is that true?
I did. I fought last Friday.
So you're telling me it happened. You're telling me that you fought last week.
Yes, I did. We did. We were flogging this for the longest time since about June, I guess. I was supposed to fight in Quebec City in a demonstration fight for a foundation, a charitable foundation, and I got a slight injury, and I decided that my training was going to suffer because I needed to take some time to, recuperate from that injury. And in the same thought, I contacted my manager, Mr. Thériault, and told him I want to do this in Ottawa instead. And so I threw the idea out at him. I want to do something for a foundation within the context of an event that we've been promoting for the last 28 years. We call Capital Conquest, and that happened last week, and or 2 weeks ago. And he was okay with it, and we decided, all right, we're going to go ahead and start promoting it. And we initially had and you will probably remember this name, Rodney Batiste. I fought twice, once in Montreal, once in Ottawa. They were great fights. The fight of the year. Both him and I had great fights together, and something happened with his management, and I decided that wasn't the right fighter for me at that particular time, and we did something with a local young man who was one of my fighters, and also having become a world amateur champion, that drew obviously some attention. So he, 25 years younger than I am, but I started with his father. We were 17 years old together, so I know the kid quite well. He's very respectful. You probably know the name Benoit Ladouceur. He fought in Montreal a couple of times, and very respectful, very clean, very technical fighter. And we had a ball. And evidently the foundation of choice was Make-A-Wish Foundation of Eastern Ontario. We committed ourselves to raise $10,000 for them. Wow. And we surpassed that. We did 25,000. So they were well served. The people that attended, which was great. Some of the people that I hadn't seen in 20 years, 25 years. We sort of recreated the era of the 80s when I was there with the music and chanting my name and stuff like that. And it was really a very, very nice evening, and people were generous with their applause, were generous with their smiles and their statements, and obviously in their pocketbook as well. They were more than happy to give to the charity of our choice. And so, I did that. I did well. I wasn't hurt. Both Benoit and I looked reasonably good, but he looked way better than I did. But I'll tell you honestly, I'm never doing that again.
So it's over. You're hanging the gloves for good this time. It's over.
Yeah, no, that's it, man. I had a great time, and if we do something, it'll be very low key. But no, that was it, and we had a great time doing it, and a lot of people, the people in my school here contributed immensely, and they probably don't realize how much of a contribution they did. Even the young ladies that spar, and they're good, all good, very good technical athletes here. So what I required from them was throw some punches and kicks, the way that you were taught, and so it gave me a chance to sort of get reacquainted with my defensive skills and stuff like that, without fear of getting hurt, because they're not heavy girls, they're not powerful strikers. So even if they did hit me, they did a lot at the beginning. They weren't hitting they weren't hurting me, but they contributed immensely. And then I stepped up to the more intermediate fighters, and then I stepped up to the more advanced fighters, and I was keeping keeping myself in the game adequately. So it was fun. The purpose was a very honorable one, and we achieved our goal, and life goes on from there, really.
Well, it's crazy that you still, you're still in shape to even remotely do something close to that, but you went rounds with almost many people you fought, and it's unbelievable, and it just increases that legendary status that we thought it was impossible to even bring it to another level, but you just brought it by competing again. And now that it's officially that you're hanging up the gloves, it looks like coaching and promoting are you be mostly focused in that aspect, or just mostly like you want to just be a coach and try to help these young fighters try to achieve what you would do?
Yeah, I'm a school owner, and we have kids from 4 years old to women and men in the late 60s, early 70s, and so their needs are a priority for me.
Yeah.
When people invest some time and money into a martial arts school, our responsibility is to meet their needs. One of the things that's important for me to tell you and the audience as well is that you're right. The competitive side of me is, for the better part, retired.
Okay.
But an athlete's career is never over. And by that I mean that we did have some attention from the media, we did have attention from the general population, and so when we speak, people for whatever reason will lend an ear because he was champion of the world, maybe he has something interesting to say, and so my career as a fighter is not over, but the career as the Iceman and able to draw people's attention to a cause like we did 2 weeks ago, that's part of the continuum of a career. And so people who are involved in professional athletics or politicians or teachers or whatever, you never stop. You really never stop. That's part of your history, it's part of your makeup, and for whatever reason we're given a plateau to work for the betterment of the community once we retire, because as a professional athlete, we the lack of a better word, we are selfish. We take care of ourselves. We take care of making sure that we have enough money for the rest of our lives, and so on and so forth. Take care of your family, blah 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 blah. But once we retire from competition, if you don't understand that the media attention or the plateau that you've been given is still there for you to do something positive for the community, well, you're missing the boat. Simple as that. You're just missing the boat. And I just certainly urge and encourage anybody who has a professional career in the midst or at the end of it, don't think that you're finished when you hang up the gloves or put your hockey stick away or baseball bat away, what have you. You do something positive for the community, and you're going to live forever and ever.
Well, that's exactly like what you've done, and especially even with your fighters. I know a couple of your fighters, John Bernier, Pat Arsenault, a couple of these guys, and these guys are stellar competitors, amazing fighters, and the fact that they have that respect aspect like you, it just shows that what you're preaching, you're walking the talk. You're pretty much all your fighters are living by you, and you definitely see that. And people who want to go to your gym, that's the right move. And especially for me, I've been wanting to go to your gym for the longest time, and haven't gotten the chance to come out to Ottawa. But definitely when I come out, I got to train with guys like you, like Mernier, and he told me he wanted to we could get spar. I don't know if I'll be sparring with him. I know he's got a heavy hand. I've seen that close, but I definitely would love to come to your gym. You are one of the greatest kickboxers that ever lived.
You're always more welcome to. People are welcome here all the time. We have people coming from all over the world, in fact, and they do get to spend a little bit of time with me or my manager, Mr. Thériault, and for them, hopefully that we provide a little sunshine, a little insight on what a professional athlete is like. What made me the athlete that I became. It's simple. We're human beings. We're just doing something extraordinary. That's all.
So now for people listening, what's next for you? Is there a big promotion lined up for you? Do you have a fighter that's going pro? Do you plan on putting your fighters in maybe Glory? Maybe diving into the MMA community and MMA coach? What's next out for the Iceman?
Well, like I said, I do have a school. We do promote kickboxing, the traditional style of kickboxing, although, that's sort of, I guess, coming to an end, or maybe not as interesting for most fighters now that people can do low kick fights and stuff like that. And I like Glory. I mean, this is one of the sports, the fighting sports that I really enjoy, because it does resemble kickboxing the way that I practice it, with low kicks. And when fighters like Benoit Ladouceur, when we first started working with him, I told him, Ben, you're going to go as far as you want, and I will always be by your side. I'm not going to push you. I won't be behind you. I won't be in front of you, dragging you or pushing you along, but I will be by your side to assist you. If you have any questions, if you have any, desires, if you have any dreams of becoming whatever you want to become, I'll support you. And that's exactly what happened. And so there are, there are fighters waiting in the wings, I suppose. And whether I have one here in this particular generation or not, I have no idea. There's some very talented kids here, but punches and kicks doesn't make a fighter. And so I will promote for people for their own sort of bucket list thing. Some of them will fight 10, 15, 20 fights and then retire. Jonathan Meunier was telling me that this may be his last fight because, he's got a young family. His wife just went back to in the workforce. As brutal a fighter as he is, he's such a gentle person as a father, just really very impressive. It's like 180 degrees assassin-like as a fighter. And the biggest teddy bear in the world, because sometimes the kids come here and it's just very impressive, to tell you the truth. And so this could be his last fight. Benoit Ladouceur also is up there in his years. He's also a father of a young child. There's a couple of other ones that are coming up, and who knows what tomorrow has for them. I don't know. They don't know. And like I said many times before, speaking about myself, destiny just unfolded itself in front of me, and I just went with it.
Yeah, well, but before we go off, I've interviewed, so many people in the fight game, UFC champions, kickboxing champions, but at the end of the day, I think this kind of hits home because, to be honest, without that moment, and I remember like it was yesterday, and I remember my father even said like, wow, that was the fact of my first debut fight, you coming to me and telling me all the nice things you were telling me and influencing me and putting me out there. You're the reason why everything kind of blemished for me. You're the reason how at the end of the day I was on the radio, I have this show, and I'm talking to fighters and trying to expand the sport, especially in our city here in Montreal. Like, Iceman, like, you're one of the people, and I really respect you. You are one of the pioneers in the sport, and I thank you from Canada, Montreal, and I thank you personally from me and from our show.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you so much. And I thank the population of Montreal. I've fought there many times, and the population of Quebec and Canada. The support that I received is part of the successful venture. When people give you, you want to give in return. And that's what I did. I took the energy that they gave me, and I returned it to them in entertaining fights and so on. So I'm very, very grateful for the people that have supporting me all these years, and now I have a new generation of people that look at me and they just, you don't look like a champion.
They don't know.
Because with in the era of the internet and YouTube and stuff like that, and they go and look at what I've done, and they come back the following day, eyes the size of Clooney's, and say, "Wow!" And that to me is just precious, but I am very, very, very grateful. I was blessed, and like I said, I did an interview beginning of the year this year, and I said to Johnny Davis, who has a podcast in the United States, Johnny, my best years are ahead of me. The best years are yet to come, and I truly believe that as a human being, I have a lot more to offer. I have a lot of great moments ahead of me, and I'm just excited every day. Every day there's something that just sort of lights me up and keeps me going.
I God, thank you again. It was a pleasure having you on the show. I'm definitely going to be texting you soon when I come out there. I definitely got to be training with you and your team. I got to see what's up. I got to have at least a taste of the information you're giving these kids. They're getting that step advantage over me. I'm not liking it. I need to know what the Iceman is teaching them. So I'll definitely be heading out there, champ.
Well, anytime, my friend. Anytime.
So we will talk soon, and thanks again for coming on 2.5 Fighters.
All right. Take care, my friend.
Bye.